And so now the moments that you all have been waiting for, we're going to turn it over to our executive director, Lindy Spartan, to introduce herself, to introduce our organization, and to share some information about these laws.
First off, I just want to say it's really exciting to be even hosting a program that's talking about New York State. For the last 5 years, we've been operating mostly in California with active programs, just behind the scenes, talking here and there in New York. But as someone who was a first generation born in New York, of course, the outcome of what happens in New York is dear to me, as all my friends and family are still here, live here, play here, work here. And so I just want to take a second to again thank our community partners, Can Inclusive and Revel on the Revel, for being welcoming partners and helping us get the word out and helping us create this accessible information. And two, I want to thank WeVapps for continuing to support our mission. I do want to say that this is going to be an overview of the 3 pilot programs that New York has rolled out. It's really exciting. There's a lot of lessons learned here. And what's really exciting is when you get an opportunity to fail differently. And I really can honestly say that whatever happens in New York, just from the design of what we've seen laid out, doesn't look like we're going to have the mistake of failing the same. And so in many ways, that is already a win for the advocates on the ground to make sure that Myrto was full of lessons learned and watched out for those gaps and landmines, so to speak. All right, and so basically this initiative proposes a framework for adult use cannabis licensing, which includes a supply chain that will start with pre-existing farmers in New York and will end with social equity and justice involved individuals owning the first retail dispensaries in the state. All right, a little bit about the Hood Incubator. Again, my name is Lindy Spartan. I'm a co-founder, I'm the executive director, and the Hood Incubator empowers drug war survivors to end the drug war by 2040. We believe by ending the drug war, we will increase the health, wealth, power, and prosperity of survivors of the drug war, especially in Black communities. All right, so although we're going to only be focusing on one part of the 3 programs today, I did want to give a quick overview so that if you were to just be here only for this hour, you would know what also is happening. So there's the Farmers First program, and that's the program that created the conditional licensing for those that already had hemp licenses. Then there's the Equity Owners Lead program, and this program prioritizes justice impacted individuals with a history of business ownership for the first round of conditional adult use retail dispensary licenses. And what's really interesting or exciting is that the first 100 to 200 licenses in New York of these type in general will be justice impact licenses. And then the reason why we're here today is to talk about, for this hour, is to talk about the Cannabis Social Equity Investment Fund. And the proposal for the Cannabis Social Equity Investment Fund is that it would create a $200 million fund that will be sustained by industry tax dollars and private investors. And the goal of the fund will be to select social cannabis businesses with retail cannabis dispensaries as prime locations and help cover some of the costs, give them turnkey operations and funding upfront and significant funds to help them really get going. And that's important because we've seen in other places, namely like the California market, one of the biggest mistakes, again, that New York isn't doing, if we're gonna fail differently here, it's really exciting, is that one, places like California did not have the funds ready up front. Two, the funds that they did have available were so small compared to what was needed that they didn't really get to have the great impact that was intended. So if the maximum you're really giving out in a jurisdiction is up to 100,000, and that's tiered, and it's a tiered process to be able to get to that 100,000, it's not even all at once. We know that isn't that great. But one of the great things that New York is doing differently, no, one of the interesting things that New York is doing differently, or it might prove to be challenging, is that the loans here are with interest, and it don't seem to be grants. There seem to be loans with interest and not the grants. And so I move on to next slide. Okay, so I don't know about y'all, but I personally have some research to do later. I was not familiar with this agency, the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, but they're about to be tasked with some major work, right? They're going to be helping to roll out, getting site dispensaries ready for our justice impact folks to open their stores by end of year. That's the goal. Okay, so backing up, again, this Cannabis Social Equity Investment Fund, the primary objective will be to provide equity applicants selected, licensed by the control board with commercially viable retail cannabis dispensaries. That's major. That's like, we already know this is good. So like, you're not even needing to go through what's it called, like building and fire and permitting. That is major, because in other jurisdictions we know that it is building and fire and all those things that are making sure that we're up to code and that we're properly in the right zoning, ensuring that something's already zoned properly and that something's already, permitted properly. Those are two things that could be a learning curve for a legacy operator or someone otherwise justice impact did, but now it's removed. Then that coupled with the money from the fund that can be used for costs associated with starting and operating a retail dispensary, which is including but limited to the property leasing, purchasing, planning, design, all that. This is really going to be a game changer. So again, the goal in New York is to have justice impact folks ready in line to compete, day one with our medical operators. And so like this agency, who I've been sleeping on, is tasked with quite a task. So shout out to them. Let's all send them some donuts or flowers or something. Make sure we keep them happy so they can work fast and efficient. And DSNAY will have the exclusive authority to, so I think I should say that real fast. Actually, don't send them any flowers or candy. That might look like bribing. I take that back, because they have the exclusive authority to select all site locations of all retail cannabis dispensaries and negotiate all these terms with landlords. Again, that is major, because again, we know that we've seen in other markets, when folks start hearing that little green cannabis, all of a sudden like, this is not available, and then it becomes available, but now the price has greatly gone up. Okay, so some quick questions. Are resources distributed through the fund, a grant, or a loan? Resources given to social equity license holders through the fund are loans that must be paid back through by the license holder. And the loan will include all amounts the fund has used to finance direct and indirect expenses. That is huge. Associated with the sourcing, leasing, we already went through that. But again, these are all different things and new things and improved upon opportunities for the justice impacted and legacy operated. I think they said Illinois had the best program a couple of years ago. They were really happy. I never agreed with that. I always thought California looked like it was going to play out better. But people aren't even saying that New York has the best program as much as the media was talking about Illinois. But it's just obvious that what New York is rolling out is more innovative, and really looks it's like it's trying to, it looks like it's solutions oriented policy, based on some of the huge challenges that we saw in those other markets. So I'm not even a politician like that, but because I do, like I said, we're gonna fail differently. And that's why we're here today. So we stay in community so we can figure out how are we failing differently this time, because something's gonna happen. We just don't know what it is yet. We'll figure it out together and support each other through it, right? Okay, how much money will be in the fund? Well, it's not completely vested yet, but when it gets there, it'll be up to $200 million. They expect it to exist for roughly 10 years. And then I guess that means that the fund is expected to reach its full 200 million capitalization by 2024, and then be available for 10 years following that date. It's capitalized. So by like 2034, I guess it will exit out. What will happen with that money then? Because remember, it's a loan. So every time, someone gets the money, they're paying it back. So the idea is at the end that the 200 million would be there. And so I guess my question then would be, what happens to that 200 million? Is it just go to the police, or does it go to another part of programming? Does it go to community? I don't know. So I'm going to pause there. And before I get to the next part, I'm going to see if I had any questions in the chat.
So we have one question. David asks, how competitive do you all think the application to the fund will be?
Well, it doesn't say that it's if you qualify, then you get it, which would then make it seem like it's not competitive. Like all you have to do is hit some sort of metrics. And then boom, now you get the funds. That is an approach that like California used, and a negative of that was that then they had such small checks that, again, we don't know what the impact of like a little $50,000 is supposed to do when you're talking about the cannabis industry. So when they're talking about these 750,000 and these like large numbers, I can't say because this is new, and I don't think New York has done something like this before in this way. But just from that figure, we can say competitive.
We have another question. Do you know how many retail licenses are eligible per applicant for the social equity round?
So
Correct.
each license can get 750,000, and you have the up to 3 license that you're allowed to have. Does that mean that collectively you can only get 750,000, or that each license that applicant can get 750,000? Jordan C. Medley in the chat, can you respond if that's your question? Rephrased.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but I was trying to see if by doing the social equity round, you are limited to only one location. I think there's some confusion about that.
So we'll go over it more in detail during the retail session, which is at 7:30. But
Okay.
For this round, you are allowed to have up to 3 licenses, 3 conditional licenses. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, so 3 is the max number that you're allowed to have.
Thanks.
The next question is, will the fund support only dispensaries or also product manufacturers? So one, I want to create clarity that this fund is not currently, the rules have not currently been in place. They just finished the public comment process. So there's still room for the rules to change around. But currently, as they proposed it, the fund will be supporting for dispensaries to make sure that folks have dispensaries. So they have not specified that this will be for manufacturers, but that's not to say that in the future that will not happen. But currently, as the proposal is at this point, it is only specifying retail locations. The next question we have for you, Lenise, is what is the process Dasani will do to select the real estate?
Oh, that's a great question. And someone else had a question, who was in charge of Dasani? I love that we call it that drinking water. I have no idea. Like I said, prior to reading these proposed regulations. I didn't know Dasani existed. So what I would do if I were y'all, and what I'm going to do because I'm me, is because I had so much different things to do, I didn't get to prioritize this task, but I'm gonna go Google it. And I'm sure they have a dsny.gov, and usually they have the picture of the guy or the woman or the human that runs the agency. Maybe they even have public meetings, and they list when those public meetings. I have no idea. Maybe it's not a public meeting type of agency. Maybe it's a closed door public meeting. I literally have no idea. Those are two really great questions. And as engaged citizens, especially engaged citizens that care about the success of these legislation and proposed regulations and the outcome of the cannabis industry, to have a diverse, equitable, and inclusive of justice impacted and legacy operators, we should definitely find out the answers to that. I encourage everyone to find out the answer to that. I know that we will later.
And then I see Marvin has his hand up for a question.
Yes, if you don't mind, I could give you a little background on the organization you're speaking of. Can you hear me?
Yes, please do, sir. Please.
But just Denise, it's actually called DASNY, is the way it's pronounced. It's the dormitory of the state of New York. Ruben McDaniel is the president. He's actually a member of the OCM board, and we speak to him quite often from our office. I've had people set up meetings with him. So Paula, James, first of all, my name is Marvin Holland. I'm the chief of staff for Senator Sanders. Sorry, I should have introduced myself. And so we've been speaking to Ruben McDaniel the past 6-7 months on various issues. So we'll be happy to set up a meeting for you, Denise and Ruben, and perhaps have them on the next time y'all do one of these. We see if we can get him on, and then he can answer those questions himself directly.
That'll be perfect, because we're actually going to have, well, we're actually going to have the first meeting of our legacy and equity empowerment roundtable May 28th. So if it's possible for you to link us and for us to meet prior to that meeting, then that'd be great. Maybe we could invite him to that first meeting, because I know folks have questions. I would really appreciate it. Thank you. And thanks for coming and sharing your voice and being a part of this meeting today.
Thank you for the work you're doing. And I'll go back on mute and be quiet now.
Any more? We were on questions before I moved into this is the same Marvin that used to be at TWU. David, Legacy and Equity Empowerment.
And to Lenice's point, we have a Legacy and Equity Empowerment Roundtable, which I just dropped links to application in the chat. We're accepting 100 applicants from the entire state of New York who will be supporting on a monthly basis, folks who are interested in pursuing licensure. So we'll be supporting them through helping you all create community, helping you all organize, get involved in the regulatory process, teaching you all, how to, speak on the issues that you guys are interested in moving forward with, hosting application accelerators. So for folks who actually are ready to apply, assisting you with filling out those applications. So we encourage folks to apply for this roundtable if you're interested, because we only have 100 seats and we'll be meeting with folks on a monthly basis.
Yes, and just to give some context to the importance of legacy and equity operators and or those justice impacted, whatever the phrase is we can look to Los Angeles when the county contracted and ended up using some technology that ended up having some glitches, and because of the digital divide, which means that those with having more or have better technology and those that might have been justice impacted didn't. So we saw that the applications, although everyone was ready, and people's applications got put in at a different rate. And because of that, and because most importantly that the equity operators were organized, prior to this happening and already in relationship and already building with each other, they were able to come together and put together a lawsuit to sue the county. And in response, won, and the county released 100 more licenses for retail only for equity operators, because they had recognized how that technology situation had caused a greater divide. And so that's a win due to the people power and of them being organized. In Oakland, we know that the regular business tax rate for the retail cannabis is 10%. But if you were in the same city and you ran a dry cleaning service or a bodega, that the regular business tax rate is 0.012. That's 1,000% difference. And again, if you are a legacy operator or just an impacted operator, and you're trying to run a business and your first compliant business, and it happens to be in one of the most overly regulated industries, then the question is, how is 1,000% increase in tax justifiable to this person? And so what we were able to do in Oakland for the equity operators would come together, and for revenue up to 1.5 million gross, recognizing that we saw that the average or 80% of equity operators are grossing $500,000 and less, we got it so that they can get the regular business tax rate, so that they could have a fighting chance of not going out of business because they got a tax liability debt. So those are two examples of cities in California of how the operators coming together really were able to push more for equity operators. And then I'll use Chicago or I'll use Illinois as an example of how equity operators not coming together is a reason why their market looks the exact same as it did before adult use started. And I mean, I think that statement speaks for itself. They didn't come, they weren't able as a community, as equity operators, to do anything. They were able to get divided by politicians and each other on small nuanced things that in the end weren't major to the progress of them all being able to run operating, thriving, legal, compliant cannabis businesses. And so when we come to New York, right? New York, our legacy operators, our equity operators, we want to think about it. Do y'all want in 3 years the legal businesses to look exactly the same as the legal businesses that exist now, like in Illinois? Or in 3 years post-regulation, do you want to see more equity businesses thriving, operating at higher gross revenues, paying taxes than we ever saw in California? And I think with the way the legislation and proposed regulations got set up, you're set up to dunk on California, but that doesn't absolve us from our part of the work, which is being in communication with each other, being in relationship with each other, understanding the law, understanding what pieces all play out. And again, when we are all across the state, we get to see the difference in working together. We get to see the difference between if something's our individual issue or if something's a systemic issue. And that's really one of the biggest things about the roundtable will do. Because often when something happens to you in your business, it's gonna be the biggest thing in the world. And then you approach it that way. But if it's something that is nuanced to you, then you'll be able to approach it in a more level-headed way. And if it's something that's nuanced to the whole system, then you'll be able to approach it in a level-headed way. And again, that comes from us being a community with each other. And that is why we want to stay on top of this. We don't want something to go down and then we're scrambling at the last minute because we're trying to be reactionary and we're all upset. It doesn't have to be like that. We know that we have to work together. We know that we need to share information. We know that we need to study. We know that we have to find opportunities to support each other's businesses, whether it be directly through supply chain partnerships, or whether it be indirectly by some of us getting on boards and commissions later in the road when it opens up, which means we have to study now what is required of us being eligible and qualified to serve on a said board and commission. So I'll pause there because the roundtable is going to be really important to make sure that we're all together, communicating. My time, I'm doing great. We're ahead of time. So again, before I close out, to just wrap up the session and talk about overall the great things about what New York is doing, although there still are some concerns. But again, we want to be positive and say that there are some great things. And with us being organized, we can expound and we can add on those great things.